Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to first class of meditation 102. So you've all graduated from 101 and now you're 102. Can we start? I want to do a moment of silence. One of my acting brethren was murdered last night in Atlanta. His name is Thomas Jefferson Bird. We worked on two movies together. We didn't act in the same scene, but we were in the movie together and did readings together and knew each other. We were in Girl Six, and Clockers, directed by Spike Lee, but he was murdered last night in Atlanta, and I'm pretty broken up about that. So let's just have a moment of silence. I'll be thinking about Tom, and we can think about the sick and suffering, and have compassion for that today. Thank you. So we're gonna meditate first, and then we're gonna have some discussion, questions. Let's see how it goes. But the point of the 102, meditation 102, was to introduce some basic concepts of Buddhism, Buddhadharma, which we'll try to do and get to together. I think that's we'll do our best and see how it goes, but you guys asked for it. So now the requirement for this class was to either do one other class of 101 or review it through the video, so I don't have to go through the technique and spend time week after week on that. But since this is our first, I'll do a very brief thing. Back straight, not rigid, not slack. Legs crossed comfortably. You could be in a chair. If you're in a chair, keep your hips should be above your knees. That will help if you're on the floor as well, on a cushion or not on a cushion. Keep your feet flat on the floor if you are in a chair. Head straight, tilted, not upright, but tilted a little bit. The teeth should be open. The mouth could be either open or closed. The tongue should be behind the upper teeth, relaxed. Hands, I do this, back of the hand on the other, and curve, and I put it in my lap. You could put your hands on your knees, on your thighs. Point is to be comfortable but alert. We do our eyes open in my tradition. You can close them if you want, but you might fall asleep. Eyes rested comfortably on whatever you're looking at, which could be the wall, a view out the window, an inspiring picture, a flower, whatever. And then we breathe through the nostrils, relaxed breath, not a deep breath, not a shallow breath. You may find you need to take a deep breath, you can. The breath is our anchor. We will continually go to the breath when you find yourself thinking. The point is not to push away, judge, or follow the thoughts. It's just to acknowledge you're having the thought. I will do a little bit of guided meditation for people who haven't done the class before. We're going to do 11 minutes because I prefer odd numbers. Starting now. The breath is our anchor. Keep your focus on your breath, the space between your nostrils and your lip, upper lip. Focus on that as the breath goes in and out. Don't feel rigid. If you need to adjust your posture, it's fine. Just settle back in. Keep the practice going as I speak. Relax. When you notice yourself thinking, just notice it and go back to the breath. That's the practice. That's meditation. Working with the thought. Emotion, we treat like thought. Feel angry, feel sad, notice it, go back to the breath. And you can do the same with physical discomfort if you're feeling from sitting, the way your back is, you feel a little tension or strain, just relax, notice it, relax, go back to the breath. We're dealing with our mind, and we use the image of a clear, spotless, unstained, luminous, limitless, full of potentiality sky. That's our mind. Then thought and emotion are clouds and storms that arise from the mind and go back into the mind. If we notice them, when we don't notice them, then we solidify with them almost. They become us almost, and we get stuck in them. And that's how we've lived most of our lives, really, for better and for worse. Back to the breath. So I find myself, I'm thinking about what I'm going to talk about today. So I have to recognize that and go back to the breath. And I go back to that clear image of the sky. That helps me. thinking is not bad. Thinking is not the opposite of meditation, right? Thinking is not, it's not that you're doing it wrong or failing. Just notice the thought. Back to the breath. Thinking about what I have to do later today. Noticing that. Back to the breath. What is interesting is if you think about who or what is noticing the thought. So you know the mind is thinking the thought, but what is noticing the thought? That's mind too, right? So it's mind recognizing mind, a different aspect of mind, recognizing thoughts of the mind. Back to the breath. A little trick is if you find yourself like falling asleep, getting drowsy, you can raise your gaze a little bit higher. Or if you feel yourself too agitated, do the opposite or something. You can raise a little, you can lower your gaze. But that question I was asking about what is recognizing the thought, it's the mindfulness aspect of the mind, which is what we're trying to cultivate. So I really want to thank all of you for being here, especially the people who are in the middle of the night in Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, India, and Asia, other parts of Asia. I appreciate that dedication and commitment. So I'm going to read something about teaching that the great Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, has a lot of great books, even a great novel called The Novice. Not the tradition that I practice, but somebody who I do read quite often, who's brilliant, great activist as well. Marched with Dr. Martin Luther King and brilliant mind and a great Lama, great teacher. When I teach a friend how to practice meditation, I don't call myself teacher and my friend student. There is no transmitter and no receiver. We are one and the same. Together we help each other. Well, that's what we're doing. That is exactly what we're doing here today. We are helping each other. My friend Angela in Michigan is a teacher of high school students, and she's implementing what our practice that we do here in her Monday classes, Monday meditation to 9th and 10th graders, 10 minutes every Monday. So that's all a result of you guys showing up, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And there's people who aren't even taking this class who are now getting benefit from it. Here's another quote. Cherish the merit you have. This is showing a gratitude toward your present. Be kind to all sentient beings. This is enriching a good fate toward your future. That has to deal with the concept of karma, which was a very big topic this week. When the president got sick, I posted something wishing him a speedy recovery, which prompted a lot of interesting discussion, because I'm very critical of the president usually. Well, pretty much always. And some people have very mixed feelings about that. And we're bringing up the concept of karma as this, he got it because of karma. That's why, and that, although that is true, karma is responsible for everything. It's not just a cosmic, retribution system. It's how everything works. So maybe we'll get into that if you guys feel like it, because that seemed to be we brought it up here a couple of weeks ago, and it's been in people's minds this week. But I do want to read about Buddha first. Who was Buddha? Many of you may not know. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. He was born about 2,500 years ago in the northern India near Nepal. He was a prince. He lived in a big palace, probably like a big, almost tiny little walled city. Very rich, had every comfort, and lived pretty much, I think, exclusively in the palace his whole life until he was in like his 20s. And one day he went out of the palace and he was driving in his chariot with his driver or something, and he saw a sick man, an old man, and a corpse. And he had never seen any of those things. He had been sheltered from all of it, and he was not prepared for it, and asked his driver, "What is that?" And the driver said, "Oh, all beings are subject to sickness, old age, and death." And that rocked his world basically so much that he had to figure out what the meaning of life was, because he realized that his pleasure and his rarefied existence was going to come to an end, and he had never considered that and didn't really understand that concept. And he left his life as a prince. He had a young wife and a young child and lived with his family there, and he left and became an ascetic, a wandering seeker, spiritual seeker. Cut his hair, put on simple robes, begging bowl. You see a lot of the Thangka paintings of the Buddha with the begging bowl. Begging bowl, you'd go and beg for food in the villages, and people would give you food because you were a spiritual seeker, and they appreciated that. And he fell in with different groups of spiritual seekers, atheists, materialists, idealists, dialecticians, religious teachers, and they practiced all different kinds of spiritual disciplines. And he learned meditation. And he practiced for a long time, and he didn't really get anywhere. And the meditation was without the view. And today we were without the view because I did not start with setting the intention. I'd like to say it was intentional because it feeds into this, but it wasn't. I just forgot. We set the intention by saying the four measurables prayer, which is, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So Buddha was learning these meditation techniques, but it was without the view, a certain view that is almost a view. It is a view of non-duality and interconnectedness, with all of the beings, and pursuing enlightenment, pursuing spiritual advancement for the sake and benefit of all beings. So without that, he learned how to calm himself, but there was nothing bigger than that. It didn't really go beyond himself. He did this for 6 years. And much of it was under very strict austerities, hardly not eating much, maybe eating like they said, one tiny meal a day, vow of poverty. And then at some point he realized that he wasn't finding the answers that he set out for. So he said, maybe all this kind of self-abnegation and denial is not working. So he started eating again. A woman broke his fast, really, offered him milk and honey. And he was inspired to sit under this Bodhi tree, Bodh Gaya in northern India, for 6 days. And at some point, by thinking about existence, he realized what he had been looking for had never been lost. He called it the wonder of wonders. This very enlightenment is the nature of all beings, yet they are unhappy for the lack of it. And around 35 years old, he was awakened. And for about 7 weeks, he would not speak. And he said he found a bliss of liberation that he felt no one would understand. I have found a teaching like nectar, profound, peaceful, beyond concepts, luminous and uncreated. Were I to transmit it, no one would understand. So I will not speak, but will stay in the forest. Those were his first words upon attaining enlightenment. But pay attention to those words. Profound, peaceful, beyond concept, luminous, and uncreated. Very similar to the qualities we give to the sky imagery, to the mind, really. But then after 7 weeks, he was asked to teach. And he decided to teach in a place called Deer Park near Varanasi, India. And he taught something called the Four Noble Truths, which we also call the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. Today we're going to talk about the first two noble truths. The first truth is the truth of suffering, which he realized that in existence as a sentient being, you will suffer. And you will suffer in many different ways. You will just some in very gross ways, like disease and loss, poverty. You name it. There are very heavy ways to suffer in the world, and some much more subtle ways, like sitting in a comfortable chair and then realizing you're not comfortable after 5 minutes. So often the happiness that we experience are not always permanent. Or you buy a house that's really nice and then you realize the weather's not as good as you liked and maybe you need a different type of climate. What we realize is there's no happiness that's just permanent state. And ultimately impermanence is a truth that we all, deal with. We're going to get sick. We're going to get old. We're going to get sick. We're going to die. So that being the first noble truth that there is, that all beings will suffer, right? He tried to figure out and teach the cause of suffering. Why is there suffering? And he came upon the truth that it is because that we are unaware of our true nature. We are constantly under the impression that there is an I poised against everything that isn't I. And because of this dualistic tendency of mind, we objectify our experience and make judgments about the objects we perceive. This leads to attachment and aversion, which generate karma and endless suffering, dualistic clinging, emotional confusion, habit, karma, and the fruits of karma are all consequences of this lack of recognition. That's a very big concept. So basically saying that our ultimate reality and the ultimate truth of our existence is not just as individuals, that it's much more about interdependence and impermanence and non-duality in terms of existence. Buddha did analysis. He did not answer the problems of life by the scriptures, or he did it by analysis. Sometimes they call him the first scientist of religion. Buddha does not say simply believe what he says. He says think, analyze, search, find from your own experiences, then trust. Most traditions put faith first. Buddha says experience is primary. If there is experience, then faith will follow. Buddha said, do not trust me or what I say just because I say it. Test and experience for yourselves. To end suffering, not only by relieving its symptoms, but by eradicating its root cause, is the aim of the Buddhist teaching. We must first realize that the true cause of suffering is not outside, but inside. That is why true spiritual practice consists on working on one's own mind. So, that's a lot to digest. And that realization that the Buddha came to, Buddha means awakened. The realization that he came to took a lot of analysis and a lot of work to get to, and it's a complete almost revolutionary way to see existence and to see reality. And that does not happen overnight. That might not happen in this lifetime. That might not happen in many lifetimes, but that's the path. And it begins with the practice of meditation and, like they just said, dealing with one's own mind. Cultivating compassion, because of the reality of interdependence. If with the help of Dharma you manage to eliminate your inner poisons, nothing from the outside will affect your happiness. But as long as those poisons remain in your mind, you will not find the happiness you seek anywhere in the world. That's from a great Tibetan Lama named Garchen Rinpoche. My teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, says meditation is to know the nature of mind. And your mind, the true nature, the true essential nature, without all the thoughts and without all the emotion and stuff, that essential nature of mind is Buddha. Buddha is not the name of a person per se. It's also the name of mind, the ultimate nature of mind. That image we use, talking about clarity, unstained, limitless potentiality, luminous. So the first step, working with the mind, is to cultivate immeasurable love. The first line of that prayer, may all beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. The Buddha's teachings are very vast. He taught for 50 years. He died in his 80s and he lived, he became enlightened in his 30s. So there are 50 years of teachings. but they can also all be distilled into three very, very tiny, simple concepts. One, do no harm. I think you could figure that out for yourselves. Don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, sexual misconduct, cruelty, you know. Two, cultivate virtue, all the great spiritual qualities of compassion and love and generosity and patience and forbearance and meditation and things like that. And three, tame one's mind, tame your own mind. Those are really the three basic concepts of Buddhism. Okay, that's a lot to digest. This will be archived on IGTV if it's a little too much to deal with at once. You can go back to it. Let's take a question. Last session, you touched on reaching a peak or bliss during meditation. Is that something one should strive for? No, it's not something you should strive for. It may be a byproduct and it may not be. And if you do, just leave it where it is and keep to the technique. You know, we were talking about Buddha before he kind of realized the view, and he was meditating, almost just meditating for himself without working with the entirety of sentient beings and for the benefit of sentient beings, right? Often that kind of meditation can lead to bliss, and you're sitting in a state of bliss, but it's not really doing much. It might feel good to you, but it's not really doing much for the rest of the sentient beings in the universe and all the universes. And when you dedicate it and have the motivation to benefit all sentient beings, then you're practicing Buddhism. LL says, is it justified to pursue happiness? I always thought that acceptance and awareness took precedence to happiness, but maybe they achieve learned experience in tandem. Depends what you consider happiness. Kind of goes back to what I was just saying. You know, if it's just about you being happy, that's good. But it doesn't really take into, you know, the bigger picture, which is we don't exist alone. We're completely interdependent with others, you know. If there were no others, you'd die in, you know, days. Think about it. You know, you wouldn't be able to get, you know, it's just, we're so dependent on each other, and we don't even often want to admit it or know it. Kelly says, can you make a resource literature list for further reading? I have two recommendations that our producer Nick will put up today at some point. Lila says, what's the best way to incorporate the tenets of Buddhism in your life? One is meditation. Two is practice patience, love, compassion, loving kindness, things like that. To learn and cultivate mindfulness. So you're not acting from a place of negative emotions uncontrolled. Dusan says, what if one does harm, not in the moment of anger, but later with just cause? How would Buddhism look at justice within the Western concept of justice? Buddhism, I mean, doesn't really, it's not about justice. Karma is about cause and effect. So if you did harm, but with just cause, I don't know if that's harm. I mean, if just cause means for the higher good, then it's not really harm, is it? Liz says, how do you process Buddha leaving his family and do no harm? His family was probably taken care of since they were really rich and had servants and all those things, but so he didn't leave them in poverty and suffering, you know. And what his karma was to do was, you know, I think very outweighed whatever he was going to do, being in, you know, he was just continuing that cycle of, you know, ignorance really in the palace. And it was much more important for him to realize what he did and bring benefit to so much more people. He didn't leave them bereft and starving and you know, homeless or anything. So I don't think there was negative karma per se accrued in that choice. Karma is the law of cause and effect, right? So everything comes from something else. Everything comes from prior causes and conditions. Evolution, right? That's a really good example. Actually, there's nothing that's really random. Even something that seems random has causes and conditions that cause it, right? If you have a box of numbers like a lottery, yeah, it's random. You're going to pick one at random, but at random means the angle that your hand goes in and the amount of strength you have to go deep. You know, there's always some causes and conditions that will make you choose one over the other. There might not be intentional, but there is something at work. It doesn't just magically appear in your hand. Think of evolution, the theory of evolution, if that's what you believe, were very specific, precise causes and effects and causes and conditions and natural selection and how species evolved precisely to the environment and the situations they were in. There's nothing random about that. And the way the Big Bang, if you believe in that theory, how that happened, cause and effect, worlds being created out of an explosion. You know, the only place the scientists really get stuck is how that happened, because even scientists say something can't come from nothing. So that's, you know, they can trace it back to just at the beginning, that little particle that gave birth to everything. But where that particle came from is a tough one to answer, because, like you say, everything comes from something, from causes and conditions. And a Buddhist perspective, because Buddhists believe in reincarnation, the concept of reincarnation. So there are results that arise in this lifetime that may be the result of actions taken many lifetimes ago or the previous lifetime. Sometimes there's instant karma, instant action and reaction. If you put your hand in on a stove, it's going to burn. That's cause and effect. Very simple. That's a very gross example of karma. There are also much more subtle examples of karma. You know, like we were talking about, like, you know, talking about randomness and things like that. Like something, if you think about something that's very random, there are subtle causes and conditions that allow everything to happen. So that is why meditation is so important. Mindfulness is so important. So in the present, you take actions that create positive karma, which lead to positive rebirths and more spiritual progress, things like that. Let's meditate again. Let's meditate for another 11 minutes. And we'll answer some more questions after that. And if you want, you could think about, when you become aware of the thought, who or what is becoming aware of the thought. So there's the thought, and then it's like there's the thought and there's the observer of the thought, or the energy or awareness that's becoming. They're both from your mind, but they are different and separate. Become a little bit aware of that. See where that takes you. Talking a little bit more about karma. Even if you don't believe in reincarnation and strictly think about karma in terms of this life, because reincarnation is a whole big other topic that deals with what exactly is being reincarnated, because Buddhists don't believe in a soul necessarily. Not a soul, really. It's a whole other thing. And what is the self? What gets reincarnated? We'll save that. But even if you just believe in this one existence, right? And karma is not about destiny. And karma does not negate free will. But, you know, whatever conditions that you found yourself in, like somehow, it was your karma to do this class with me, right? Somehow it was my karma to teach you meditation, which was not my plan 3 months ago or whatever, 4 months ago. I didn't know you. I wouldn't have thought about doing it, but causes and conditions, because of you've seen me in TV or you followed my Instagram, and I was on Instagram, which I wasn't a year ago. And somehow these causes and conditions came together. And now today, on Monday, October 5th, we're sitting in meditation together. It didn't happen out of nowhere. And it was not, there was nothing written a year ago in the cosmic record saying you are going to do this class. It was not destined, but causes and conditions happened and led to this. Karma does not negate free will, but the free will is based on your karmic situation at the time. I don't have free will to, like, in 5 minutes get on a rocket ship and go out of space. There are people who do get in the rocket ship and go into outer space. That's not my karma right now. I don't have the free will to do that. And I do have the free will to turn this computer off, at the end of the class and get in my car and go to the supermarket. So think in terms, if you really want to think and learn about karma, think about everything that happens in your life, and think about the causes and conditions that led to that. And you'll start to see how karma works. So karma goes together with meditation, with mindfulness, because we want to take actions. Karma is a result of actions. We want to take actions that create positive causes and conditions. Now, just talk about strictly this lifetime. Our friend who I told you, because of seeing this class, is teaching meditation to high school students. Maybe one of those students is going to become, one of the great Buddhist lamas in the next generation. We don't know, but maybe somehow there are causes and conditions that can allow that, right? Whereas if we just said, we're not going to do this class, we're not going to study meditation, we're not going to think about these concepts, we're just going to keep going the way we were going, that wouldn't happen. That's how we think about karma. People always talk, like with the president, say, well, it's karma. He, because he was ignoring COVID and he didn't, and that is definitely true. He caught COVID probably because whoever he was with didn't have a mask on and he wasn't practicing social distancing properly. And, it wasn't, some cosmic thing, God saying he's got to get it to punish him. It wasn't about that. It was a direct result of the action and inaction. Those causes and conditions created that. And you take that back, however the virus originated, was someone, whatever, slaughtering animals, we don't know, or was it in a lab, or who knows what it was. There are causes and conditions that led to that somehow. Okay, let's answer some questions. Is karma the same as the butterfly effect? Susmita, that was kind of what it is, the butterfly effect. So the butterfly effect, really what that illustrates is interdependence. It's an example of karma, that every action has a reaction. The butterfly effect, if you don't know, there's this kind of scientific principle theory that a butterfly flaps its wings on the other side of the world. So I'm in California. So butterfly flaps its wings in Australia, and somehow whatever subtle wind that creates affects a bird, and that bird, moves its nest somewhere, and the nest catches on fire, and the forest gets on fire. Like that, everything has an effect. Every action has a reaction. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And that fire might create pollution that affects my asthma in California. You can trace these things in very subtle and very long chains of interconnectivity. So yes, Susmita, it is an aspect of it without a doubt. Dino says, so karma is karma a product of combined will of people and other entities? In some aspects, yes. There's your own individual karma. There's your familial karma, right? You were born into a certain family, to certain parents, into a certain brothers and sisters. That's your karma, to be raised in an environment with those people for whatever causes and conditions. Your parents happen to be in Michigan, or your parents happen to be in Italy, and that, you were born, you didn't have free will, at that moment to be born in a certain place because of whatever causes and conditions your parents were experiencing. That's where you were born, right? Then there's then you have a communal karma, say, of your village, of your town, of your city, and then bigger, expanded, of your nation. There's planetary, there's generational karma. We are all experiencing a pandemic as a global community. That's a karma, a global karma that's affecting us. There's subtle levels of karma and gross levels of karma. LL says, I'm curious when you decided to call yourself a Buddhist. I grew up in a Buddhist household. On my mother's side, we went to temples, used prayer beads, practiced vegetarianism, etc. As a child, Buddhism felt cultural rather than spiritual. I jokingly called myself a bad Buddhist. For a while in my 20s now, I find myself connecting strongly with Buddhist values and meditation. When did it become clear to you that you were Buddhist? Did it feel somehow important to title yourself as such? Well, I mean, there's a great book by Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche. Nick, if you can find that, it's Dzongtsar, I think, Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche, called "What Makes You Not a Buddhist." You're a Buddhist when you take refuge in the Buddha. Actually, there's vows specifically that you take to become a Buddhist, and when you say you take refuge in the Buddha, because existence is suffering, to have refuge from that suffering, and to work towards transcending it, you take refuge in the Buddha as your teacher, in the Dharma, which is the teachings, and in the Sangha, which is the community of other Buddhists. When you take refuge, that's kind of the official ceremony, and usually you do that in the presence of your teacher. I think it's probably possible to take that refuge on your own. I'm not really 100% sure, but mostly it is, you don't just call yourself a Buddhist. You take that vow. That means you are, you're taking refuge and you're becoming a Buddhist. Take refuge in the Buddha. A lot of people, I did not grow up culturally with Buddhism. I grew up culturally as a Roman Catholic. Many people in the East, especially in Asia, grow up culturally with Buddhism, but not necessarily all of them practice meditation. Just because you were born into a Buddhist family does not mean you become you may, a lot of them do, but not all of them do. There's sometimes just an element of it being a communal cultural thing. You go to temple once a week and there's festivals and holidays and things like that. And it does have a certain ethical discipline that you follow. That's very positive. But the real nitty gritty of Buddhism is, it starts with meditation and taming the mind. That's not a cultural thing. That's not specific to a culture. Our mind is not specific to a culture. In many ways, Buddhism, there's different traditions that really correspond to the different countries that Buddhism went through. The iconography, whatever the lamas wear, or the things in the temple, and those are certain things, come out of the culture and relate to the culture and inspiring and everything. But it's really the teachings that are the essence and the practice. And like the Buddha says, do not believe just what I say, practice and see if it works. Buddha's not saying believe in everything I say and it's not about that. It's really about experiential, experience. It's an experiential system. And the Buddhists asked for that. And for you, all the same, doing meditation, becoming more mindful. Do you see a difference in your life? Do you see a possibility for a difference in your life, for growth, for positivity, for spiritual growth, benefit of other people in your immediate circles, to yourself? You have to, only you can say that. I can't say that about you. Tyler says, does your mind create or have the thought? And is it your consciousness that makes you aware of having that thought? Yes, I would say pretty much your mind does create, it has the thought for whatever causes and conditions that lead to that thought. We all have different thoughts, right? And it is your consciousness that makes you aware of having that thought. Yes, the mindfulness aspect of your consciousness makes you aware of having that thought. What is the mindfulness aspect of consciousness? It is that luminosity, that clarity, that limitless potentiality, which is really our true nature. That's a very big concept, what our true nature is, right? Because we think of ourselves as very, I don't know if I should get into this right now. This is a whole big topic, but we think of ourselves as very solid beings, right? Our boundaries are very clear of who we are and what we are. But in reality, if you looked at your arm under an electron microscope, the strongest, most powerful microscope they have on the planet, you discover it's made up of these tiny particles. And scientists and quantum physicists have said that the ultimate tiniest particles exist sometimes as a particle and sometimes as a wave, depending on whether they're observed or not. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means we're waves of what? Of energy. I mean, that's really what we're made up of. So, I mean, as is everything else on the planet. So if someone stands on the moon and looks at the earth, they see this big, beautiful globe. Well, is that, and they don't see 9 billion people or however many billion people doing all these things. They see that, but that to that being is a reality. To you, looking in the mirror is a reality. To some being that had these powerful microscopic eyes, our reality is particles and waves. They all are an aspect of reality, aren't they? They all have a truth to them. These are very big concepts, the concept of the self and what is the self and how much of the self is a construct of our own design and our own influences and things. We'll maybe get into that at some point. We're going to stop here. I introduced a lot today. I introduced a lot more than I thought I would. And I hope it's not confusing or too difficult. We can step back from it if it is. I want to keep you all coming back and get more people here. But we're scratching the surface, Buddhadharma. And we're going to continue our practice of meditation. Most importantly, that's going to be that's the foundation of what we're doing. And I think I'd like to do like a long session of meditation, maybe in the next class, maybe just start off with like a solid 20 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that, because that has to be the foundation, cultivating this mindful awareness and mindfulness. But the Dalai Lama, Ethics for the New Millennium, the Dalai Lama, Art of Happiness, the Dalai Lama, How to Practice are all really good. Lama Yeshe, Yeshe, has lots of really good books, especially for beginners. If you feel a little confused and overwhelmed, I really beg you not to turn away. I think, we can break some of these concepts down and penetrate them. Send me feedback. You have our email address. Send me things that confuse you. Send me things that you want to. And a lot of it I'll have to research because I don't, I'm a student, so I have to look towards my teachers for answers that I can give you. But we can break it down, unpack these things more so they become clearer and can become part of your practice. All right. So let's dedicate. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you very much for being here today. And I really look forward to more of this. It's really means a lot to me. Thank you.